My name is Mike Rodriguez, and for the last 12 years, I've hosted a podcast called the AudioNowcast with a bunch of my industry friends. I work in the audio industry, and this is the space where I mix. I spend a lot of time in here, and one day I decided it would be good to go outside. So I did. I traveled around the world, filming the unique spaces where audio is made, played, or listened to. This is AudioNowcast Spaces. We're here at Dave Smith's Instruments in San Francisco, North Beach area. This is amazing. We're going to be talking to Dave and just having a great time. So I'm in heaven. You know what? There's some keyboards here that I've never actually even touched before. Like, these are some amazing. This is the real deal. There's no soft synths here. This is the real stuff. The ironic thing is Dave is actually responsible for the first soft synth, Reality. But the fact that he went from soft synths back to hardware is just amazing. And you can see why, man. There's something about just playing.
I had a music background, played piano as a kid, played guitar in bands in college, that sort of thing. And I had a technical background. I had an electrical engineering degree from Cal Berkeley. So, the two just joined together naturally when you get to synthesis. I bought a Mini Moog in 1972, I think it was. And I didn't really know what it did, but it looked cool, had a keyboard on it and a bunch of knobs. So I bought it just to play with, and that's what got me started. Well, the very first things I did at Sequential Circuits was building sequencers and programmers and that sort of thing. Actually, while I still had a day job as an engineer, in Silicon Valley. But then I got the idea for what became the Prophet 5, and that's when I quit my day job almost exactly 40 years ago, actually. It was in 1977. And it just seemed like an obvious idea to me. I had been working with microprocessors already for a few years, and I knew about some synthesizer chipsets that were going to become available, so I kind of combined the two to build what I thought everybody wanted. I certainly wanted, and that was a polyphonic programmable synthesizer. And the first parts were, it's a long, involved process. I'm obviously starting from zero and designing a musical instrument, but I do remember fairly early on, I actually breadboarded part of the one voice of the of the synthesizer just to see what it would sound like. And it sounded really good. I was kind of pleasantly surprised because you never know with a synthesizer. You design things, it comes out the way it comes out, and you have some control but not total control. That was the very first time a keyboard player could play a keyboard and polyphonically and press a button and go from one sound to a completely different sound. And that's why everybody loved it. I can go from strings to brass to lead to bass to, that was not possible before that. It was a pretty big deal. Well, it started, it was kind of a spin-off sort of the Prophet VS, which is a very unique instrument with the vector synthesis. And the project actually started initially when I was still working with Yamaha. We were trying to think of a new product that uses some of their technology, but would be kind of a follow-up of the Prophet VS. And we came up with the idea of wave sequencing, which was the core technology in the Wavestation. But then the whole thing with Yamaha sort of fell apart, but then Korg wanted me to start an R&D group for them, which I did. And so we just kind of looked at their technology and said, well, let's just continue with this new product that turned out to be the Wavestation. But yeah, we were just trying to come up with some new clever ideas to use the digital technology, but build off the evolving sound that we got out of the Prophet VS. We had a high-speed serial interface. Roland had a lower-speed serial interface. I think Yamaha had something also, and Oberheim just had a big parallel interface. It wasn't, very effective, or wasn't very practical, I should say. So we just knew that the industry was going to go nowhere if we all had these separate interfaces. So it really wasn't a matter of which one was better or worse. It was just getting everybody to agree, and that's kind of what I did. Is I organized meetings. I tried to get everybody in, said, let's agree on something. I don't care what it is. I really had no invention issue with this, but it had to be my interface. I just said, I don't care, let's just make something. Because it actually ended up being closest to what Roland had, if you actually track the actual technology. But again, I didn't care. I just wanted something to happen. So, I gave a paper at the AES convention trying to get people involved. I organized meetings at NAMM and eventually got the whole thing rolling and got it to happen. We knew it was very open-ended and flexible for going into the future. We knew it would work on computers. That was defined from the beginning. We didn't know exactly everything it would do. We didn't know it would be in billions of computers and billions of cell phones eventually. As far as the still being 1.0, looking back, it sort of makes sense because it still does what everybody needs it to do. People have been trying for 15 years to come up with a replacement, and it still hasn't happened because everything works. Plus, you could buy something now, plug it into something that was made 35 years ago, and it'll work. I had been trying to get Yamaha and then Korg to do software instruments. At the time, I was very interested in physical modeling, which had to be done in software at the time. But it never seemed to go anywhere. And then I had this friend, Stanley Younglibe, who used to work for me at Sequential, and he had some contacts at Intel, and Intel wanted a soft synth to show off the power of their computers. So they contracted with Sear Systems to build it. So we built the first one for them, and then we did a second version that we licensed to Creative Labs, and then we built Reality, which was kind of a third generation, which was the first professional soft synth. And that was, 20 years ago, 95-ish, 96, I forget. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, though I realized after a few months that it was, to me, software was sort of boring. It just doesn't have the look and the feel of a real musical instrument. And I shouldn't say real musical instrument because they are musical instruments because you could play music on them. Right. But for me, when you have to type on a keyboard and look at a monitor and then plug in some controller to try to make it do stuff and dragging stuff in your menus into your mouse, it just, I'd rather just hit some keys and have this knob that does one thing and it always does that thing. If I come back 10 years later, it'll do the same thing. It's a musical instrument. It's just hard to get that relationship that you can't get with software. And there's a million other things that I always rant about, but we don't need to go into all of that. Actually, it's funny how it started. As I mentioned, I was getting tired of software already. And at the time, Roger Lynn was working on his Adrenaline project, a little guitar effects box, which is actually really cool. And he was trying to get it finished up. And so I just said, hey, I'll help you out, and did a little software and got involved in that. And it just reminded me how much fun it was to design a product and be able to actually hold it when you're done. I mean, that had been gone for all this time. So it just got me excited about doing something again. So I said, well, I'm gonna build a synthesizer. And I hadn't done hardware in 15 years. I hadn't designed a product in a long time. So it took me a while to get used to the new tools and so forth. But everything had come so far as the tools and what's available for the technology. I mean, I could just sit at home and design a circuit board on my computer with a $500 program to lay out the circuit boards, and then I email it someplace, and then a week later I get the circuit boards back and I send it someplace else and they put all the parts on it and I get it back. And it's just, compared to how that worked in the sequential days, it was great. So my first product was the Evolver, and that was kind of a hybrid analog digital instrument. I was trying to do something new and different. In hindsight, if I wanted to make a big splash, I probably just should have started out with a Prophet 5 and give everybody what they want. But this was in 2002, and people still weren't, they're just starting to drift back into analog. Right. In fact, I kind of point to 2002 as the start of the revival, because that's when the Evolver came out, and that's also when the Mini Moog Voyager came out. So Bob Moog was just getting back into real synthesizers. So that was, I think, enough to get the interest started, and people started buying old stuff, and it all just kind of grew from there. It's a special thing to be able to start with nothing and end up with a new musical instrument. There's not many people in the world who can do that. And I've got a great team here, and we come up with the ideas, and we've got a pretty good streak now of products that people really like, because I try to put personality into the products, because if it's just a slab, then it's really not all that interesting. There's got to be something about it that grabs musicians. Now, one musician might like one better than the other because they have different sounds and different features, but it's got something that will appeal to the inner musician. I think that analog synthesis, subtractive synthesis, has passed the test of time at this point. It's been around for 50 years. Everybody knows what happens when you turn a cutoff knob or when you turn a resonance knob. And it's a sound that's structurally easy. I mean, it's a very simple, a couple oscillators, filters, a couple envelopes, and yet it could do so many different things. There's some other great synthesis methods, granular synthesis, physical modeling, a lot of other, even FM, but none of them have this immediacy where you can just know what's going to happen when you turn a knob. I don't have a 10-year plan. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't even have a 1-year plan at this company. We just build a product, and as we get close to finishing that product, we start thinking about what we're going to build next, and we go all over the place before we decide what to do, because there's no reason to plan beyond that. I'm not doing this for growth or to take over the world. I'm doing it because we're all having a lot of fun making instruments. Well, it's somewhat cliche, but I don't tend to dwell on what's already happened. I tend to be more excited about what I'm doing now and what's coming out next. Every once in a while, at times like this, where you kind of forced to go back and say, well, yeah, I guess it has been a lot of cool stuff in the last 40 or 50 years, however long I've been doing this. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. I think the best part is knowing that I was able to do it more than once. being lucky enough to having sequential circuits and a Prophet 5, I mean, that I could have rested on that, but knowing that I've come back and done it a second time, that feels pretty good. Change it. So you go up, it's all really nice. Down to banjo. For a sample manipulation, I can turn loop on and go in here. We have center and size. So it's that easy. But then there's something a little bit more subtle and maybe a little bit more versatile with this guy, because it doesn't have that strong
I'll tell you
sound.
about this guy. It was much like even the emotion. You know, you can get emotional sounds off this. This, don't say it's not emotional, but it has that edge. It has that bite.
Just grabs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But this, you can get that. You can get all those. You know.
So if you're an Oberheim guy, you buy one of these. Otherwise, you get one. It's just like 1979.
Oh, that's good. Hey, before you go, could I possibly take a picture with you?
Sure.